to many times volunteering. So I recognized some of the students and teachers, and it was really incredible. So I experienced firsthand on a personal level what we saw evidenced again today, just how incredible these programs are in terms of exposure for the next generation, and also preparation in terms of job readiness, which is really the mission of this council, regardless of age, whether you're a mid to late career worker or whether you're that next generation of American workforce, of which I see some of you ladies and gentlemen back there. It's all about acquiring the skills needed, whether they're hard skills or soft skills, to do the job and to find a pathway that you love and can be passionate about. So we saw that on full display here today, and I really thank you for hosting us and welcoming us. And I especially thank the students and educators who we met today and who join us here today. This is our board's third meeting, and I want to thank all the members for their incredibly hard work. The working groups have met more than 24 times since our launch. So each of you at these meetings and outside of these meetings are bringing such tremendous value and expertise to the table each and every day. Since our last meeting, we've had a lot of good news coming out of the administration, given our pro-growth policies that are driving a strong economy and, really critically, inclusive growth in this country. Americans are earning more. Real median income increased to $63,000 in 2018, the highest level in over 2 decades. And amazingly, and my co-chair, Secretary Ross, who will be speaking in just a moment, the census came out with a report just last week, which was incredibly exciting to our administration and should be exciting to everyone, which is that income inequality in this country is finally decreasing. Incredibly important as wages rise, as more and better jobs are created, inclusive growth is being realized, which is a core mission of ours. Incomes are rising, and in 2018, the poverty rate fell to its lowest level since 2001, with historic lows for African Americans and Hispanics. Most new hires of prime age working adults are minorities. Women, specifically African American women, are predominantly driving this trend, which is awesome. Under this administration, for the first time, college-educated women are the majority of the college-educated workforce in our country. And young women are increasingly enrolling in STEM-related coursework, which we know and heard today is really foundational for most jobs of the future. There's no such thing as technology jobs anymore. Every job involves technology to some extent. In fact, during 2018 and the 2019 school year, the number of female students taking AP Computer Science increased by an astonishing 32% in 1 year. Moreover, students from historically underrepresented groups increased by 29%. We have prioritized access to STEM education from the earliest days of this administration. The growing use of technology across many sectors of the economy, including AI, synthetic biology, robotics, make it critically important that all Americans have the STEM skills necessary to be competitive and to remain competitive. I also wanted to report out on a few new federal actions taken since our last meeting. In July, we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of our Pledge to America's Workers. Our goal was modest when we initially start, but as is true of everyone at this table, we like to swing for the fences, and I am incredibly excited to share with all of you that over 350 companies have signed our pledge, committed to creating over 13 million, close to 14 million new opportunities in the form of skills training, apprenticeships, on-the-job learning. That is close to 14 million individual lives impacted. And then think about the multiplier effect within those families and communities. So it is an enormous success, and we're grateful for all the private sector employers and industry groups who have joined us in this commitment to ensuring that our workforce is and remains the best in the world. The Department of Labor also proposed new rulemaking which would establish high-quality, industry-recognized apprenticeship programs, or IRAPs, another major milestone in our effort to expand apprenticeships, especially to industries where the apprenticeship model really hasn't thrived. The Council of Economics Advisors released a report assessing the evidence on the performance of government employment and training programs, finding that many of the programs, unlike the private sector or locally driven alternatives, lacked rigorous evidence on improved wage and employment outcome for recipients. So we can do better on a federal level, and that's by connecting with industry to ensure that any of our programs align with the in-demand work that exists in our countries and importantly, filling those job vacancies. Finally, we had the second annual summit at the White House for artificial intelligence, where we brought together hundreds of stakeholders to discuss the promise of AI technologies. This follows the President's executive order announcing development of an American AI initiative, a strategy that includes training a workforce capable of using AI in emerging occupations. And this is something we're starting internally, looking at our own workforce, the government, the country's largest employer, and how we're using AI and teaching AI skills to our own workforce. And this is something I'd like to thank Chris Liddell, who joins us here today and knows all of you, for his great leadership on. Today, as we hear from each of the four working groups and vote on the first set of recommendations that will be made to the National Council for the American Worker, the interagency task force charged with implementation, I want to underscore that these recommendations represent really just the beginning. These are the first set of recommendations that will be shared with the Council, and some of them we will act on immediately. In December, this advisory board will continue to share recommendations, all of which will help inform the development of the Council's national workforce strategy. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our host, Jim Clark, to provide a few welcoming remarks.
Great. Well, thank you, Ivanka, and all of you again for being here. Those that were on the tour this morning had an opportunity to see firsthand a lot of the great program and initiatives underway at Boys and Girls Clubs.
Why don't you all stand up so we can properly recognize you? A lot of people at this table should be fearful that they'll be out of a job soon with this group coming up. So,
yeah, we had a few that were interested in Bill's job already this morning. So, well, thank you again. And you know, these kids and teens represent hundreds of thousands that have the experience of a workforce job readiness initiative at a Boys and Girls Club. But what's really important is the opportunity that lies ahead. There's hundreds of thousands, millions more youth that need and we'd like to get to in terms of giving them the same type of programs and experiences you saw. And certainly that's our quest at Boys and Girls Club, is to double the number of youth that we're able to serve over the next 6-7 years and provide hundreds of thousands more with the experience you had this morning. One of the ways we're doing that is next week. The Youth Workforce Readiness Act will be introduced in Congress, a bipartisan approach to support a lot of the activities you saw this morning and resource those as we move forward. So we're excited about that. Boys and Girls Clubs, along with so many public and private institutions, have been instrumental in making that happen. So hopefully with that and all of your support and others, we'll be able to bring to life these programs for more and more youth. Again, there's really 4 key areas to our pathway in terms of how we approach workforce readiness with youth at Boys and Girls Clubs. You saw it this morning. The essential skill development is core. It's key. Second is the career exposure. What's possible? You saw a great example of that this morning. Employability skills, those hard skills that are so necessary, all the way up to including credential, which we're working on with several different organizations to provide to youth at Boys and Girls Clubs. And finally, that work experience, whether it's an internship, a paid apprenticeship, or other opportunity. So thank you for your participation this morning. Thank you for being here. It's great to host you all, and turn it back over to the Secretary.
Well, thank you, Jim, for that discussion. I hope everyone got a good I hope you also indulged yourself at the gift shop. Every little bit of sales helps the economy. If you,
some more than others.
Yeah. If you wish you had bought more, Walter Bumpius has bootlegged a sheet from which you can still order. So the time is not over with you.
You weren't supposed to share that. You weren't supposed to share that.
Well, I can't keep a secret, Walter. But thank you, Jim, for hosting us today and for showcasing this fine facility. It's great to be with such fine young members of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, Fauquier, and Atlanta. The more time you spend with America's youth, the more optimistic you become for the future of our country. And thank you also to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America for recently becoming a national partner for the 2020 census. Your trusted voice in communities around the country will help the census connect with hard-to-count communities. Your partnership helps ensure an accurate and complete count of the American population next year. It also will provide a learning opportunity for teens as census takers. Having been one myself as a kid, I know what it can do for you. They'll participate in one of the country's most important civic engagements and learn good work skills. For many of them, it will be their first or one of their first paychecks, and earning money is a good way to get them integrated into the workforce. My department's facing the same difficulty as the private sector. We must hire close to 500,000 census workers in this tight labor market. Despite such issues, we're fortunate that the U.S. economy is strong and steady. Unemployment is just 3.7%, the lowest since 1969. Average hourly earnings also growing at their fastest pace since 1969. 4.2% annualized rate over the past 3 months. The 7.2 job openings well outpace the 6 million job seekers. And to fill those openings, we need more skilled workers brought into the marketplace. Since President Trump was sworn into office, labor force participation among working-age adults has improved by 1,500,000 people. And it's important for the economy to grow at least at 3% a year. We need working-age population growth, workforce participation growth, and productivity gains. Those three must add up to at least 3%, or we can't grow at 3%. With our working-age population universe growing at less than 1%, that means the combination of the other two must grow at more than 2%. This will only be achieved if participation continues to improve, and reducing the skills mismatch is key to achieving more participation. The urgency of our national labor shortage is real, and that's why Ivanka and I called on you to deliver actionable recommendations today. We'll spend most of this meeting reviewing and discussing the recommendations from each working group. A few logistical notes. Co-chairs will have 20 minutes each to present the recommendations from each of the 4 working groups. We will discuss the recommendations after each presentation. After that, we'll open the floor briefly for additional thoughts from each of you, and then we will hold a voice vote on each working group's recommendation. So thank you again for your devotion to this board, and we especially appreciate the leadership of our 8 co-chairs. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ross, and I would like to acknowledge your team who joins us here today, who's been working so hard with the working groups, and our team from the White House also here, Rosemary, Cheryl, Lynn, James. I'm sure I'm missing a couple of people, but you have been doing just incredible work, and we appreciate it. So thank you all very much. And with that, maybe I'll ask Ginny Rometty to kick us off and share with us the recommendations from the group that is spearheading our campaign to promote multiple pathways to career success. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you, Ivanka. And just because I'm the first speaker up, let me just thank both Ivanka, Secretary Ross, and Jim Yu. I think everyone in the room would say in the past 24 hours, they've had an experience that they will remember, 2 experiences that they will always remember. Very unique and very special. So thank you, 3 of you, for giving us all of that. So just because I'm first, I know everyone feels that way. So let me start with, as you know, I co-chair this committee with Tim Cook, and the new paradigms needed we've talked about many times, and one of them is skills versus degrees, as Secretary Ross said, to close this gap, so skills versus diplomas. And the other paradigm, name of our group, is that there should be multiple pathways to being able to get a new role, a new job, a good job. And that applies not just to young people, but mid-career people as well. So both ends of the spectrum we're going to work on. So to help prepare, 2 parts of our working group. One is around the campaign, and this is really what I'm going to talk about today and ask for your approval, is the marketing campaign that's going to highlight these pathways. Secondarily, over time, we'll work on some other recommendations that I've highlighted in other meetings before about policy, and maybe some conditions may be right that maybe this 4th quarter we maybe get a chance to make some inroads on a few of those. So more about that on another meeting. So let me just repeat a statistic for our group. Only 1/3 of Americans do have a bachelor's degree. Only 1/3. It's a number that stays in my mind. And there is a really great untapped group of people out there that can do many new jobs in this digital era. As I've shared with you before, we had coined this new collar, and 15% of my U.S. hiring last year was new collar people. That meant folks that didn't have a 4-year degree, but they built the skills or credentials to do very great digital roles, cloud, cyber, and the like. And I'm a big hirer, so 15% is a big number. So I think a lot of people are coming to our viewpoint here. There's been a great study from the National Science Board that highlights the potential of the 2/3 of the U.S. population that do not have a university degree and how great that potential is. So more written about it, and we'll get back to our campaign, the more we talk about it, the more this is going to come to be, actually. So our marketing campaign, it's really about you can get a great job, many different routes without a 4-year degree. And there's many pathways for different kinds of education. And how we're going to do it is real life stories. And I think we all know a story emotionally appeals to every single one of us, as we witnessed last night as people talked about stories. And so real life stories, but that they also highlight the importance of lifelong learning. As I said, this is not just for youth, lifelong learning. So this is a chance that everybody on the committee and our whole advisory board will get a chance to be involved in 2 ways. One, I covered last night, so thank you for the unanimous support of that contribution to this. And the second way is that everyone's going to get engaged because I want you to tell your story. It's a time to highlight your company. Ivanka, I think we can highlight the Pledge to America's Workers as well as a story of the number of people who are willing to hire and what they'll do. And so I am going to really encourage every one of your firms, we were going to come to you, to be the creative. You will be the storytellers. Think outside of the box. Think human stories that are out here. So we've been proudly leading this work, and actually all the heavy lifting is going to be done by one of my team now. We're going to present to you the concept for the marketing campaign. And Ann Rubin, Ann is here from our team. Ann's on our marketing team. She's going to take just a few minutes to show you the concept, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask, hopefully for approval, for us to go to the next steps. So I hope you, like I said, she's the real expert, okay? And I think you're going to, well, I'll let you be the judge. I think you'll see something very interesting and creative in front of us.
Well, thank you, Ginny, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to present some ideas from the working group. As you could tell from Ginny's remarks, we on this working group and IBM are really passionate about this topic and happy to do anything we can to amplify all the other work that you're doing. We have a real perception problem here. And advertising, as I'm sure many of you know, can be a very impactful, compelling, efficient way to change even deep-seated perceptions. So we've seen other systemic societal issues like the opioid crisis or bullying or things like around illness like autism, that advertising can really touch a nerve and make people rethink how they feel about things and act differently, right? And that's going to be really important here, is not only changing perceptions but causing people to act. So as you can see, the objectives, in order to change perceptions regarding pathways to success, we need to do a couple things. We need to create awareness that there are, in fact, multiple pathways available to gain good paying jobs and to get career success. So we really need to educate the target. We also need to change the perception that the alternate pathways can result in fulfillment and success, and they're very rewarding. So IBM has put some initial thoughts together on what a national campaign could look like. We don't have actual creative yet, but just some thoughts about what we might do, and we would work with experts from agencies and from you and from your teams to put this together. So the advertising would likely run on TV, on social, on websites, maybe radio or outdoor. It really depends as we keep working and we think about and talk to the target audience, how do they consume media? So that will impact where we run, but it would be a big national campaign. And the creative itself, as Ginny said, would likely feature real people, compelling, inspiring stories of real people who have succeeded with alternate pathways. People from your companies, people from outside. We would find really amazing stories that would inspire people. So it's also really important that we create a very inspirational, action-oriented landing page or digital experience, and I'm going to show you a prototype. This experience needs to compel people to act. Somewhere they can go. So they see the advertising, they feel really great. Now what? Well, I need to go somewhere to get more information and to see actually what to do, because just telling them isn't going to be enough. So if you could go to the next page. The first thing that we wanted to do, and because it is a topic that Ginny and IBM feel so strongly about, we thought we would conduct some research on our own just to understand a little bit about the target audience. It's wrapping up now, and we'll gain hopefully some really insightful knowledge that will enable us to talk more relevantly to the audience. So we'll do things like understand motivations and drivers. We'll understand interests and perceptions and reactions to some descriptions. So we'll show descriptions of pathways and get reactions. And we'll also, importantly, understand barriers. So what is the mindset? What are the barriers keeping people from pursuing alternate pathways? The research is being conducted among two target audiences. We've discussed this in our working group a lot. One is students aged 16 to 20. So end of high school, starting to think about what they want to do post-high school. Maybe it's college, maybe it's a career, maybe it's something else, but they're in that mindset. Or maybe they've graduated high school and just taking time off to figure it out. They don't know. So this will be a great resource. So it's that age, 16 to 20, and importantly, their parents, because those deep-seated perceptions absolutely extend to the parents. And the parents at that age are such a big influence on their kids. So the kids need to know how to talk to their parents about this. The other audience would be mid-career, so people who have left the workforce and want to come back, or maybe people who are reskilling, upskilling, changing jobs, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know what they need. So those would be the two target audiences. If we go to the next page, so in terms of timing, we will get some research insights back shortly, and then together as a group, we'll explore some creative concepting. We'll work with agencies. We know that we know some agencies that are interested in working with us, which is great. We'll move into production. At the same time as we do creative, we'll create the landing experience, and I'm going to show you a bit of that. We'll all work together. As Ginny said, it's all about the resources that we all have to make this really rich. And then we'll create an influencer marketing plan, and I'll be ready to launch in January. After launch, public relations will be really key here. Earned media is going to be critical to getting the word out. And then, of course, we'll monitor the campaign, evaluate, adjust, optimize as we go. So as we get market results, we'll keep fine-tuning to make sure it's as successful as possible. So if the campaign were to launch, if we were to move forward, we would want to do an interactive landing experience. This is just a prototype. That we put together just to help explain what we're thinking about. So you can see, if you go back to the previous page, there's two areas. I'm a student or I'm ready for a career change. So that is the two different audiences. So there'll be a place for both people. So if you click on I'm a student, you would maybe get some facts. If you go to the next page, you might see some, the first thing you might do is take a quiz, because maybe kids just don't know how to think about this. So how can we really compel them to think seriously about what they have going for them, what they know, what they're about, what they like, and help them pick a path? So if you go one more, go forward. You might take a quiz. Maybe you answer 10 easy questions, and then you'll understand, oh, well, I think that community college might be right for me, or an apprenticeship might be right, or this kind of certificate might be right. So they'll take the quiz, then they might look at some real stories, as Jenny mentioned, real people, real stories, in different categories. If you click on one, you can see things like the job they have, the path they took. So this person, median salary is $64,000 through an apprenticeship, not through college. And so you really can see now this is made up, right? Source, made up statistics, right? This is made up, but it's the kind of thing we'd be able to get and be able to communicate. If you go to the next one, there's all kinds of places. Each of these would link out to other resources. So whether it's vocational schools, online learning, and again, you all have programs that would fit into these buckets. So when you click on these, we'd all be able to, there's a wealth of resources that we'd be able to share with the students. Okay, then this would be maybe find some inspiration, some videos. These happen to be IBM related, but it wouldn't be. It would be all of us contributing. And then at the bottom, maybe encourage employers to sign, companies to sign the pledge, and see who understands, see who gets it. Maybe people will want to work at these kind of companies. And then some resources. So you can see it's action-oriented. It gives people things to do. It gets people inspired, gets them motivated, and we definitely would need to work together to bring this to life. So one of the most effective ways to move forward is to work with a company like the Ad Council, or partner with the Ad Council. So the Ad Council, one great thing, one benefit. So we worked with the Ad Council. We did the She Can STEM campaign, and I know Ginny talked about that in the last meeting, and they do all kinds of public service campaigns. And the great thing about working with the Ad Council, the benefit is they are not nonprofit, and they get donations from media companies. So they get free media from TV stations, websites, all kinds of publications, outdoor companies, radio stations, and then they use that free media for campaigns, ideas, topics that they feel are really important. So this could be on that list to get free media. Now, there's other costs to doing a campaign, of course, but that is the most costly thing, the media. And when that's donated, that's a win. So that's what we have today. If the board approves, we'll move forward and we'll create an amazing campaign that will be seen by millions. And we thank you for the time, and hopefully you'll approve the recommendation to move forward with a privately funded campaign working with outside organizations, such as agencies and the Ad Council, that consists of advertising, influencer marketing, public relations, and a landing page. Thank you.
Good. So we'll take questions. Thank you, Ann. And Ann mentioned the Ad Council. I had said last evening, I mean, you would know them from back in time and current, is back as far as Smokey the Bear and how successful I think people to this day know. She Can STEM, I gave you the statistics. So the fact that they've now agreed already to donate this, that is really a huge, and it is a year-long campaign. So we're really well on our way to privately get this going now.
Ginny, this is really exciting, and thank you, Ann, for the presentation. Tim Cook called this morning. He is upset he couldn't be here, but thank you to him and the Apple team for their collaboration on this. Why was this such a priority for us all collectively? There is a tremendous lack of knowledge about the skills required to fill the vacant jobs in America today across so many different industries. So bringing awareness to individuals, and I love personally just seeing this presentation, how you've decided and landed on the conclusion that we can't focus on one population. We need to think about the mid to late career worker who needs to learn a new skill to do a new job in this fast-paced economy, or learn a new skill to do the same job they're currently doing today.
That's right.
Because of the speed of automation, and obviously a 4-year college route is not an easy pathway when you're later in your life, and focusing on the next generation and the upcoming generation, and allowing people to make smart decisions based on their passions and priorities. So the aptitude testing component, I think, is great. How can we leverage technology to help people get the type of guidance and counseling that can enable them to make those decisions regardless of age? So I think that's a really cool feature. So really excellent job, and I just throw it open to everyone who wants to add perspective to jump in here.
Yes. Hi, Barbara Humpton, and Mike Pivovar and I were just acknowledging that you'll hear a little bit later recommendations from our committee, number 4, which is encouraging employers to engage and demonstrating the ROI. What you'll hear from us is that there really are two sides to this coin. The same voice that speaks to prospective employees is going to be incredibly valuable for employers. So full support from our team.
Great. Johnny?
And I don't have the answer to this, so I'm going to put it back to your team. If there's been any work around the choice of the labels, so students and mid-career, and there's no perfect answer, by the way, but one of the things we have learned in our work at SHRM is that mid-career, for people who've never been in career jobs, it doesn't resonate. That term doesn't connect. You know, if you've been an engineer who's now unemployed, you go to the site, mid-career means something to you. If you've not been in a career, that term doesn't work.
Yeah, very good point.
And the other thing is we learned in our student membership, our average student is 33 years old because of how people are defining themselves as students. So if I'm doing an MBA, so I hit that button. So I think and I don't, again, have the answer at all, but I'm just the problem as I'm identifying. But words, as people get to that site, they've got to be directed, and we have to figure out what does the average, not those of us who've focused on this for a year now. Yeah. So just a thought,
input.
and I don't know what the answer is.
Don't be shy about that at all. That is why, normally I'm so bent on action. I'm like, we ought to do research, and I think they're right to finish this research now and get, whether it's the wording, the labels, what will draw people in, because we really are talking different segments. So I think it's a very well-made point that mid-career, and you've done plenty of research, so we'll connect up with you. Very good.
And maybe, Sean, if you have any perspective on this, you're in an industry that is looking for workers and does a lot on job training and skilling. What is the type of messaging from a campaign perspective that you think is beneficial, and what's your reaction to this?
If I figure out how to turn this on. Thank you, Ivanka. I think it's important to give an explanation to them about not only about the occupation, but the economic trajectory of the occupation. I can tell you that we are running a considerable program, probably over the last 10 years, to recruit women in the trades. And 3 weeks, we'll have we have a separate conference, excuse me, for the women in the trades. We'll have 3,000 delegates, so rank and file tradeswomen in Minneapolis. It's now our largest yearly gathering of union building trades workers that happen to be women. Now, in that gathering, many of the women who are been in the program for a long time are journey persons, and they're mentoring the younger women, and they're also participating in the recruitment of other women, people coming out of Boys and Girls Clubs and other programs across the country. So the one thing that's really important, particularly for that subsect, is, there's lots of issues, right? There's child care issues, there's transportation issues, there's a lot of single mothers. What kind of services do you have that can wrap around and help them, be successful in a career? So, the economic part and the part that helps them get their start in the workforce, knowing that, they need a little help in the beginning, but later on, when they reach that economic level, where they can take care of most of that stuff themselves, is part of wrapping it in there. A career's great, an occupation's great. I have my youngest daughter is a clinical social worker therapist. Okay, her economic opportunity is pretty limited in that occupation. I wish she'd be an operating engineer or electrician. Be a little easier on Dad at this point, but letting them know, here's the start and here's the finish. And in the construction industry, as many people know, once you learn the skill set, you can become an entrepreneur. You've worked with, all these family businesses that start, as a tradesperson or woman, and they get through, they get a certain amount of expertise, say, I want to be in business, right? So I think it's important to let them know where that path leads in that career, and what the economics look like, the potential, like you said, 64,000 medium income now in the country. What is it in these occupations, so they know?
Really helpful. And we're going to have to move on to the next working group, but if anyone else
Can
has
I get
a comment
an endorsement?
to jump in quickly. Yeah,
can I take an official vote to proceed?
Absolutely.
Is that as we close our working group? And
can I add just one quick question or quick comment on this point? I think the group talked about this, but I think it's important to recognize this is also not about the first job, it's also about the next job.
That's right.
Because it's also addressing the fact that I think the average tenure of job has declined 10% just in the last 5 years, and that 40% of the current workforce is also going to change the job within the next year. So I think the overall working group was also addressing the fact that it's not just the first job, it's the next job, because that is what, in fact, individuals are going to plan for and expect. And so that'll be kind of integrated into the kind of messaging around that. So I just want to add that from the perspective of the working group.
Thanks, Scott. And Ginny, I think what we'll do, just for the sake of
time,
you know what? Since you may have to leave a few minutes early, why don't we vote on this one, and the rest of the working groups will save till the end and do a vote on each of them at that
and
time.
I commit to, given so many people have done so much research and the like in this room in their own, just as Sean was describing the great work, we will touch base with everyone to get from their knowledge, not just our working group. So we'll be sure to do that. So may I have a vote to all in favor to proceed? Aye. Voice vote? Aye. Any concerns of a nay? Then thank you. And thank you to my working team on behalf of Tim Cook and I. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your hard work on this. Really incredible. Up next, we have Governor Holcomb and Bill McDermott, who are the co-chairs of the working group entitled Increasing Data Transparency to Better Match American Workers with Jobs. So if you want to take it from here, gentlemen.
Sure. Good morning, one and all. Thank you, Ivanka. Thank you, Secretary Ross. Thank you, Jim, for having us. Great to have met all the young men and women earlier today. I would say probably could speak for Governor Reynolds as well. If they come to Indiana, they're hired. Skip the resume part and all this discussion. A big thank you also to Bill McDermott and your entire talented team for coalescing and adding so much value to our topic of discussion, and for that matter, folks on the advisory board who also chipped in a lot of counsel to get us where we are right now and to produce. Bill will talk about this a little bit more in detail, but the white paper and specifically about the interoperable learning records, as some of us discussed just last night, obviously data-driven decision-making is not just but probably the most important key to identifying what someone's skills are, their experiences, and where that could ultimately lead to. So we focused our attention primarily on three fronts, making sure that we were breaking down the workforce data sharing barriers, building an individual's record that accurately, again, describes someone's skill sets, their experiences, and their insights and instincts, something that properly captures the whole evolution of someone's path, and then improving a skills-based occupational ontology. And so all that went into taking into account the benefits, the background, and recommendations for these, we're calling them ILRs, but this gets to the point that we have discussed this, that words do matter. We got to connect, we got to know our audience. And so oftentimes when I'm deep into this, I sound like I'm back in the Navy with a lot of acronyms and longer words that aren't going to actually resonate with the folks that we're trying to connect and bring into the fold. So we've kept that front and center. Just know that this has almost become second nature in Indiana, and why we're so passionate about this, and why Kim Reynolds and I discuss this at length every time we get together. But we have currently in the state of Indiana e-transcripts for all of our high schools. It's an actual data file that can be forwarded on throughout someone's career that meets all the national and open consensus standards. That work is currently right now being extended into our post-secondary space, so that's an exciting bit of progress back home in our state. We were also the first state to scale up our work with Credential Engine, and that's over 3,000 certificate and degree programs from Indiana's public 2- and 4-year institutions. Obviously, this is a big, important step when organizing what we're doing and all that goes into it, all the plans for the competencies from other programs that will be added as well. And lastly, we've been aligning these competencies at our public institutions across 30 credit hours of core coursework via our statewide transfer general education core program. And we're aligning other competencies across our next level jobs program, which has been designed 2 Augusts ago to kind of get the bureaucracy out of it, get the resources directly to the employers and to the employees. Since we launched that, we basically are telling employers and employees, you put the time in, the state will pay for it. We've had over 510 businesses take advantage of that and certify or credential over 7,200 specific employees that have gained those certificates. And we went right to individuals who stepped forward. 20,000 of them are now currently working on that in just the state of Indiana. 8,600 have already obtained those certificates. So it's working. But the question is then, now what? What's next? How do we take it to the next level? And Bill is going to dive into that a little deeper and start putting some meat on the bone.
Thank you very much, Governor Holcomb. I'm inspired by and grateful for our continued partnership and friendship. Thank you for your leadership. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to Pete Selfridge and the team that we have in Washington, D.C. They're doing such a great job and working so tirelessly on this initiative. I think Ivanka in particular, I'd just like to say, you're a culture creator. What you've done with this American Workforce Policy Advisory Board is pretty amazing, because people are passionate to serve, and you are largely responsible for that. And I just would be remiss not to thank you very much. Also, Secretary Ross, Chris Liddell, the Vice President, showed his leadership and attention to us last night, and Jim Clark for the outstanding opportunity he gave us today with the young people. It's amazing. This is a distinguished board, and I'm proud to serve with the women and men of consequence on this board, and it's a very special experience. Really it is. The President asked us to do something important, to break the data sharing barriers that exist today, to build an interoperable record of learning, and to use technology to better understand the skills gap that exists in the economy that's inhibiting the progress of the American worker. This is a big challenge because it represents more than $1.6 trillion in economic output if we get it right. And we all know the technology can maximize the potential of American workers. We see this daily in our business at SAP, especially with the most modern database platform called SAP HANA. So we are now putting words into action. There's endless benefits of a simple, effective, and easy-to-use interoperable learning record. New acronym, ILR. The world doesn't have enough of them, does it? ILRs are the way to communicate skills between workers, employers, and training institutions, so we have a single source of the truth. We're presenting a white paper, and this white paper will offer all the key milestones in our effort, and it will give you a clear guide to the development and the adoption of the ILRs, or the Interoperable Learning Records, of more than 160 million individuals, more than 6 million employers, and we will be able to track in real time more than 700,000 credentials of the workers. It's really a win-win because you're building trust, and trust is the ultimate human currency. We can secure a trusted format that can also increase neurodiversity and gender equality. We can be a role model for the world. It's an inclusive culture where we know when companies include people, they perform better. For example, there's a 2 times cash flow per employee and a 1.5 times more revenue for companies that have diversity as a lead theme in the way they run the organization. With experience data on top of the interoperable learning record, we can essentially further predict where we need to go in the future because we're no longer relying on the databases of the past. We're actually using deep machine learning, artificial intelligence, and essentially forming a blockchain with data that everybody can believe in and trust. So this is the future, and the future is here right now. And to demonstrate this, we have SAP data scientist Kian Kamyab, who's going to bring this to life in a persona of the interoperable learning record. Kian, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Governor Holcomb, and thank you to the distinguished members of this advisory board. As Bill mentioned, technology can be used to help maximize the potential of every American worker. And it's not only doable, I think it's imperative. Skills-driven matching of people to jobs is one way that we can help all Americans maximize their potential. But right now, there's a lot of friction in that matching process. Let's try to understand some of this friction, and let's do it in the shoes of Olivia. Let's contrast her experience without ILRs to her experience with ILRs. A little bit about Olivia. In summers during high school, Olivia worked in restaurant industry. Come graduation, she decided that college wasn't really for her. So she continued working in the restaurant industry and made the climb from hostess to assistant general manager of a thriving neighborhood Italian restaurant. Now 10 years out of high school, Olivia's decided that she's ready for a career change. She'd like that change to lead her to more regular hours, stronger earning potential, and a clearer path to professional achievement and growth. Today, Olivia's efforts at gathering data to make an informed decision are disconnected. They're disjointed. She might see an ad on late-night TV about an online degree that isn't really relevant to her. She might ask her friends and family for anecdotal advice. She might do some online research on her own, but that research doesn't really nudge her to action. Despite some of this friction, Olivia decides that she's going to enroll in nursing school. But just to apply, she has to go round up her transcript 10 years after graduating from high school. In nursing school, to prepare for the job search, Olivia manually pulls together a record of her achievements during nursing school and before nursing school. And while she's applying to jobs, she'll do it one at a time. She'll send her resume to an employer, and if they even see that resume, they'll spend time and money just verifying that she has the credentials she says she has. Olivia's pretty good, so she still gets the job despite the odds. And on the job, she learns a lot, she grows a lot. But a record of all of those strides, if it exists, is siloed away in her employer's HR system. So when it comes time for Olivia to make the case that she's ready for a leadership opportunity, she has to manually document all of the evidence of her on-the-job learning and present it to her boss. Olivia's professional journey, at each step, is made a little bit steeper without access to a verifiable record of what she brings to the table. If we could advance to the next slide. So let's contrast this to a future that I don't think is very far off. First, Olivia decides that she's ready for a career change. She can tap into personalized recommendations, maybe landing on the website that Ginny and her team put together, to get personalized recommendations on learning pathways and the jobs that they lead to, recommendations built on actual workforce data, an assessment of Olivia's skills and interests in past experience. And these evidence-based recommendations give Olivia the confidence that the investment in going to nursing school is a smart one. As a nursing student, Olivia adds additional credentials to her ILR. She realizes she's eligible for a medical administrative assistant certificate, a certificate that will make her eligible for entry-level jobs in hospital clinics in her city. That way, she'll get valuable on-the-job experience, and she'll begin to pay off her student loans while still a student. With graduation in sight, Olivia doesn't have to manually record all of her achievements during nursing school and before. With protocols in place for her to deliver a simple, secure, portable, and trustable record of all of her achievements, Olivia can plug into a marketplace of nursing opportunities in her city, her state, or beyond. And in fact, employers might already be recruiting Olivia because they can tap into a verified marketplace of talent and not spend time and money just verifying that Olivia is who she claims she is. Olivia gets a job more quickly, an employer gets to add a valuable member to their team at less cost. Win-win. But an ILR's role in Olivia's professional journey doesn't end when she hears the words, "You're hired." As Olivia gains more certifications and achieves on-the-job milestones through on-the-job learning, her ILR becomes a trustable record of her rising stock. And this record helps Olivia make the case that she's ready for the resources and opportunities to make the next step in her career. At every step, Olivia's career transition is made easier because ILRs and the ecosystem upon which they're built reduces the friction that slows her down from maximizing her potential. I think that's an exciting future, and a lot of that technology exists today, but we'll need to develop some tools to get there. If you could advance the next slide, thank you. Earlier, Bill mentioned that there are more than 700,000 credentials in the United States. I'm a data scientist, so I'm going to be really precise. It's 738,428. That's the number that Credential Engine, a contributor to the ILR, it's a mouthful, ILR white paper, estimates. Let's think about it in a little bit of a different way. Right now, we're, from what I hear, on hallowed ground in the DC basketball scene, in the gym of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Washington. If we think about credentials as stepping stones, as bricks that pave the way to opportunity for everyday Americans, 738,428 credentials would pave over 30 basketball courts. I did the math. You don't have to have played a single game of pickup basketball to realize how daunting it must be for Olivia or anyone to survey 30 basketball courts paved over with credentials, each of which represents a significant investment in time and money. What if Olivia, and what if all Americans, had a map to help them navigate this complex terrain? A map that identifies which credentials are related to which skills, and which skills are related to which jobs. In a basic sense, this is what we call an ontology, a mapping of a complex system. What if in addition to this map, we had a set of protocols that gave us an intuitive way to interact with and communicate about credentials in a trust-based way? A set of protocols serving a function like those that make the internet or browsing it a common experience regardless of the computer you use or the browser you prefer. Now, imagine that we also liberate data on the American workforce that's right now siloed in federal, state, and local governments, the private sector, and the education space. With a map to navigate the meaning of these data and protocols to give us an intuitive and trust-driven way to interact with these data, we have the basic outline of an ILR ecosystems foundation. And on this foundation, we can build the tools that will empower Americans to navigate the complex web connecting credentials, skills, and jobs. We have the technology to achieve this today, right? The technology that delivers to my fingertips really effective movie recommendations, the technology that allows me to have a digital boarding pass and get onto a flight, that technology that we use every day already, deployed on top of a foundation of an ILR ecosystem, can be used to point Americans to the next stepping stone in their professional journey, and can be used to let them own a record of that journey that employers can trust. This benefits a lot of folks. This benefits employers because it makes it easier for them to verify talent. It benefits educators by making it easier for them to tailor their curricula around the skills that are in demand today and the skills that will be in demand in the future. This benefits policymakers because it gives them access to evidence-based insights on the American workforce in real time. And most importantly, this benefits Olivia. And it allows her to maximize her potential as an American worker, whether she's aspiring to thrive one day as a nurse or as a data scientist, or perhaps the future CEO of the world's leading enterprise software company. The prospect of taking technology that's in reach today and applying it in a way that makes a meaningful impact in Americans' lives, that's what really excites me as a data scientist, as a technologist, and ultimately as a citizen. It's doable and it's imperative. And I think that it's imperative because it is doable. It's within reach today. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it back to Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Keon. You did a great job explaining this, and I think we can all agree this will be transformational. This is big time. The Data Transparency Group and the convening power of the White House propose this interoperable learning record prototype. The prototype will drive adoption of ILRs across the United States. On behalf of Governor Holcomb and the working group, we look forward to facing the challenges in front of us head on, and we know with your support, we will be successful. Let's give the American worker the tools the women and men need to prosper and grow. That's what it's all about, growing the American economy. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Ivanka.
Thank you, and just amazing. And you said transformative. This will be transformative, and will has the potential to solve so many of the problems that we've been talking about, as well as remove obvious friction between employers and employees and people looking to develop themselves. I can think about a ton of applications for you, Jim, as you put America's youth on their pathway, and as they acquire skills through your programs and credentials. Can we open it up for a little bit of feedback on this incredible presentation? Who's really excited about this? Because I am. Okay, good. So we've got a lot of excitement. Does anyone want to contribute, or should we just say yes, build it. Let's go.
I got a question, if you could.
Yeah, please, Walter.
And I love the concept, and I really love the way it was presented this morning, but I'd probably address this question to both governors. And that would be, did you have any challenge with folks not understanding the term? I've looked at the term, and I have to be honest with you, I had to get it defined for me. And folks I've talked to about, same reaction. I'm just wondering, was that an impediment for you as you were launching this initiative? Because after you hear about it, read about it, it makes a lot of sense. But I'm just wondering, was that
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of discussion on that. And when we think about, just like Johnny mentioned, I mean, words matter. They got to connect. I'm beyond passionate. I'm optimistic about this because we live in this target-rich environment where just in the state of Indiana, we got 355,000 Hoosiers that don't have a high school diploma or the equivalency of one. So the words have to connect with that demographic, and we've got 450,000 who started college and quit. We got 27,000 who are incarcerated. So how are we communicating on each? And so this will change, and I think you'll see, and I just make the offer at the next meeting, maybe next year, to host where you'll see a prototype working, and we can do that at Victory Lane at the Indy 500, and maybe create some more memories.
That would be a great way to celebrate. You know, several of you have made personal references. My family's from Indiana, and I got a lot of cousins and nieces and nephews. I'm not sure they would understand what an ILR would mean.
You're right.
But I think they would love the concept once they've got a job and moving forward.
Yep.
That was my rationale.
Walter, just a question. If it said shared learning record, would that have helped out?
How about boarding pass? This is their boarding pass to a career. I mean, to quote the presenter, it's that simple.
I think we should get suggestions from everyone because I think there's much more potential. We want this to be accessible on everyone's iPhone, on everyone's, and right there at one's fingertips. So I do think there's an opportunity. You said last night, resumes feel obsolete. This is the resume of the future. Well, what's the name of the future?
Right.
So next meeting. We'll get some ideas going. And if anyone wants to add something, and then we'll jump on to the next because I'm getting a not so subtle kick from the team.
This is Juanita Dugan from National Federation of Independent Business. I just want to say, very sorry. I just want to make it abundantly clear how transformative this could be for small business. Since we know their number one problem is finding qualified workers, this is going to make it clear what's qualified. And the ability for small businesses that don't have HR departments, the owner is the person who is filling all of the roles. They have, all the hands. This is something that has great promise for the 99% of businesses that are not water. So congratulations for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Juanita, and thank you, Governor, and thank you, Bill, for your hard work. And we know you're going to take this to the next level with everyone else here at the table to realize this really revolutionary project. So thank you. With that, I'll hand it over to Johnny Taylor and Al Kelly from Visa, and they are going to present their recommendations on the third pillar around modernizing candidate recruitment and training practices.
Thank you, Ivanka, and I'll do this again since last night Rosemary wasn't in the room, but I really want to give a big shout out to Rosemary. I mean, she's been such a trooper as we've worked through the details in between meetings, so thank you. So, at the end of the day, I'm going to cut to the chase so we save a little bit of time here. At our last meeting, we discussed the need for improving labor force participation and helping both unemployed workers, a defined term. If you've not been looking for a job in a while, you're no longer unemployed, although you technically are unemployed. We want unemployed workers and those people who are no longer looking for a job. We want to help them succeed in work. We know there is dignity in work. If nothing else, put aside the money, there's just dignity in it. So as a result, what we all know is there's both a labor shortage and then a skill shortage. that exacerbates the problem. So that's what we're up against as America's employers, and we want to sort for it. But to figure this out, what we have to do is know both who is on the sidelines and why. And then also, where are they located? Because it's not enough to say, as I mentioned last night, that we have a lot of people who are looking for jobs if they're not in the places, if we don't know where they are. So what we've committed to do, Al and our working group is committed to do, is to better identify underutilized talent pools, target their education and skills training, and then optimize the linkage to them wherever they are. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. To develop today's recommendations, we focused on federal and state agencies because people are gathering this information all over the place, and we're trying to bring it together to consolidate so that we actually have accurate labor market information. And basically, there are going to be some gaps, and Al's going to speak to that. We don't want to overpromise here, but what we know is at a minimum, we should know where we stand. So putting this all in one central repository is an outcome for ours. Along this way, we've met with the chairman of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so this wasn't just nilly-willy. We all actually brought experts in, and the president of the Economic Innovation Group. This is a group that rethinks economic development. We're trying to tie those workforce development and economic development tied together. And you know, I was thinking about the other day, I told my board, we're located, our headquartered in Alexandria, although we have a DC office, but because of the Amazon effect, we're actually starting to feel that. The unemployment, I'm now wooing my employees away. And so I need to figure out where are those people who really want to work in the DMV area. And if I could really target them, then we could help bring them back into the workforce and solve for my employment needs. So that's really what we're all trying to do. There are a lot of unknowns out there, but what we know is that workforce development has to be tied, and we know it is inextricably sort of intertwined with economic development, and so we're going to sort it. I'm going to discuss opportunity zones at the end of this, and how we think we should recommend harnessing the opportunity zones to solve for some of these issues. But first, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Al. Al, do you want me to get you some coffee while you're in this? That's an inside joke, so that he can tell you a little bit more about our work.
Johnny, thank you. Similar to where Bill started, data is a critical building block to building knowledge and understanding what's going on, and ultimately gaining insights. Data in and of itself is useless unless you can figure out how to turn it into insights. So the first couple of recommendations that I'm going to talk about are focused on data. And these recommendations I would look at as a step or a building block toward building a foundation. They're not an end game. It's as Johnny alluded to, it's not perfect, but we should start with what we have. So the first thing we have discovered is that there is a lot of data at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's actually a report called the JOLTS report. It's a very thick report that comes out every single month. It tells you by job category how many job openings there are. It tells you how many people have been hired in the different categories. It tells you how many separations there have been. So, for example, if you look at the July report that I'm looking at, it will talk about the government, which Ivanka said is a big employer, where openings have been basically flat, hirings have been flat, and separations have been decreasing. If you look at the information sector, we're seeing increasing openings, probably not surprisingly. And we're seeing increased separation as people, probably a limited number of people, flock to the jobs that are open. So this data is there at the Bureau and available. One incredible statistic is this one, that this shows you for the number of unemployed to the number of open jobs. And about a year ago, for the first time in history, the number of unemployed was less than the number of open jobs. So for every, and the U.S. average now is that for every 100 open jobs, there's only 79 unemployed people. And if you look back at the back end of the last recession, you had about 650 unemployed people for every 100 jobs open. So the change over the last decade, as we've obviously been in a very positive economic run, has been very, very good. Now, beyond this, we know all kinds of stories, including Tom and I were talking about earlier, about everybody being almost wishful of a recession coming, even though no data necessarily supports it. And we also know that this not highlighted here is the fact that the scope of jobs and the skills required is changing. So it only tells, part of the story. But recently, BLS, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has started to look at this data a little bit more granularly and has been looking at it at the state level. So if you look at this chart, what it shows you that there are 44 of the 50 states where the number of unemployed is less than the number of open jobs. There are 6 states, primarily you see that in the Southwest and up in the state of Washington, where there's only 6 states where the number of unemployed people actually exceeds the number of job openings. And you see this cluster, there's actually 13 states, mainly clustered in the Midwest, where you really have a huge gap between a small number of unemployed against a large number of open jobs. And this look at it at a state level is relatively new. So that really the first recommendation that we have is to actually ask the Bureau of Labor Statistics to actually push on this work to the next level and really try to determine, as they look at their data set, how granular can we really get? What can we do to make the data more accessible, more useful on a day in and day out basis? That said, I will point out that it's not perfect. I look at the job categories in this JOLTS report, and I think they need some refreshing over time. They're really not representative of what I think the job categories are of even today, never mind what the job categories are of the future. The other drawback of the JOLTS data, but it is what you have, is it's a look backward. And ideally, we need to ultimately supplement this with some data that looks forward, because looking backward only helps give you some sense of what has happened. But I think what is going to change, what is one of the driving forces of why this board exists, is the fact that there's going to be so much change. This idea of trying to unearth data and insights about what the world's going to look like going forward is going to be very, very important. So that's the first recommendation, is that we ask the Bureau of Labor Statistics to redouble their efforts here, look at how granular we can get. Let's find out all of the insights that we can possibly get out of this data, including its limitations, and that at least will guide us to what we have to do next as it relates to data. The second recommendation is that it's very interesting if not only if you look at the federal level, but if you look at the state level, there's all kinds of data. And yesterday I went out, and because of the different people on the committee, went out and looked at Iowa's database, and Iowa has a workforce development interactive employment stats database. Indiana has something called Stats Indiana, which is Indiana's public data utility. New York State has the Department of Labor Spotlight on the New York State economy and a whole host of job reports. Washington, D.C. has a Department of Employee Services. So every state has all kinds of data. And so the core of the second recommendation is that we ask the Departments of Labor and the Departments of Education to come together and try to aggregate all of this data from around the country, from the 50 states. And by the way, at some level, and the District of Columbia, and in some states, there's data that goes down to the county level and further. We don't know, obviously, what all that data will tell us, or what insights, how useful it will be, what kind of insights we would get, but it's there, and it's available now, and we ought to try to figure out how to get the federal government to help us pull all of this together, bring it up a level, put it in a single database that we can do some exploration against, and see what insights that it brings forth for us. Again, the bottom line is that this is not nirvana. The state data tends to look backward as well, although it's, in some cases, has at least current indicators of what's happening in different parts of the state. But I think by pulling this data together, we'll have a view of what's out there, and then that can inform us where we need to go and look for other data to try to complete the picture, to have a real keen sense of what we might need to do. And by the way, ultimately be helpful to, this was insightful to me looking at the state-by-state thing and how it really does differ across America in terms of job openings versus unemployed people. So the heart of that second recommendation is to ask the two departments to bring all of this data from around the country together so we can see what insights we can get. So with that, let me turn it over to Johnny to talk about opportunity zones in the third recommendation.
And quickly, it's interesting too, if you think about the ILR that we just saw, whatever we're going to call it, imagine being able to not only tell the person what jobs are available, what the average salary is, but where those jobs are located, so that they can make informed decisions along that as well. So it's just all of this can work together quite nicely once we sort it. The final recommendation that we have from the group is increasing what we're calling on-ramps to employment. And we're specifically focused on the opportunity zones. The next slide. I won't spend a lot of time. Most of us know what they are, but they're roughly 9,000, I think 8,800 plus, where governors, like the ones around the state, have identified areas that really are marked by typically, high unemployment, low education, low school. It's a bad situation. And these are areas where the people want to do better, but we can't. So we call them fragile communities. The opportunity zones have been identified. The governors are all off running, trying to tie the money and the opportunity with the people who want the opportunities. And that's sort of what this is. It's a Match.com, if you will, from an economic workforce development standpoint. And that's what we think is an opportunity. It's still being implemented, but 2020 is a critical year for investment. And so we're hoping that this is great timing for all of us around the table. We can now jump on the bandwagon of the opportunity zones. Also, as Ivanka mentioned, I serve as the president's chairman on HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. And I can tell you half of the country's HBCUs sit in opportunity zones. And so they are terribly excited about helping provide more opportunity, pardon the pun, but for people in those communities. The second slide, or the next slide, is we're talking about the share of prime-age adults not working. And I was shocked at that number. When you just look at those numbers, 36% of prime-age adults in opportunity zones are just out of work. And that's a shocking number, and the stats speak for themselves. But this is something that we've got to sort as we think about out of work, not working, want to work, and we'll sort through all of that. But we think this is an opportunity for us to focus on as the opportunity zones. Next slide. Educational attainment, when I talk about HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions as well as community colleges, the opportunity zones are frankly an opportunity there as well. It's not enough to identify the people who need jobs, but we've now got to skill them. And so the information that we're able to identify in the opportunity zones is helping us create better partnerships, public-private partnerships between higher ed, and employers. So that's a big slide. And then moving on to the final, I'm trying to run through this so that we can actually get to our recommendations. First, we need a playbook. That's the first thing that we think under recommendation. We need a playbook. Communities are all over the country experimenting with cross-sector collaboration, and we have some promising examples to look at. The federal government, along with state and local governments, should create a framework, literally, to help communities as they examine how to develop entrepreneurship opportunities, expand apprenticeships, and accelerate growing companies. So more than just getting a job, some of these people need to be job creators. And if we can do that together, then we can actually create the opportunity that we refer to. The second thing is we have to prioritize existing, at the federal level, existing workforce development activities and align the funding. Right now there's a ton of money being spent, but it's not aligned in a smart way. We've talked with both the governors, and there are just significant federal resources that are not being appropriately exploited for the benefit of the members in the community. So we're going to think about doing that. Opportunity zones give us that opportunity. There are already leaders in this space. The state of Maryland, it's supporting qualified businesses who want to expand in opportunity zones, and we know there are at least 49 other examples. Lastly, we want to encourage corporate and philanthropic investment in opportunity zones. As with all of our workforce development efforts, this private sector needs to be a leader, not dragging. This is not a government program. We think that's the wrong way to think about this. And so if we all get together, we as America's employers, and we go into the communities with higher educational institutions, frankly, K through 16, so it starts real early if we want people prepared to go to the workforce. If we put this together and group in similar industries, et cetera, I think we can actually solve for this. Al, would you wrap this up?
Thank you, Johnny. So the next step, while we wait for this work on opportunity zones and data efforts to advance, we're not going to sit idle. We want to focus on best practices in terms of talent recruitment, hiring, and training. We want to figure out how to encourage skill-based hiring practices and needs that enable workers and potential employers to come together and try to match skills with jobs. We want to focus on what does the job posting of the future look like, and how do candidates prepare a resume for the future? What is that resume of the future? That when Ginny talked about the third of the people of bachelor's degrees. I mean, all of those people, that's what they lead with is their education, and we have to try to change the nature of how these resumes appear and are formatted, et cetera. The data transparency working group that Bill and Governor Holcomb are working on talked about the widespread adoption of interoperable learning records, or whatever we end up calling them after our determination of what the best words are. We believe our work ties very closely to that work. And finally, I think we want to, over the next number of months, start to explore how AI can help us in this space. I think technology and AI are both powerful tools that could try to help us figure out how to match candidates for jobs with jobs that are open. So that's a little bit about what we'll be focused on in the coming months. So with that, Ivanka and Mr. Secretary, thank you.
Excellent recommendations, Alan and Johnny, thank you. And I just want to open it up to reactions. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not a member of the working group, but I was so heartened to see the recommendations regarding opportunity zones. At the Milken Institute, we're spending a lot of time trying to make sure the initiative works as intended to get capital to job creators in underserved areas or fragile situations, as you mentioned, Johnny. Doing a lot of work. Can't mention it all here, but one that's relevant to this that I think dovetails perfectly with one of your recommendations is, as Ivanka and Secretary Ross know, we are already partnering with the White House, Commerce, HUD, and governors to do some events around the country that are upcoming. There is a hunger by local and state officials for a playbook. So in fact, at the end of this month, so September 30th, October 1st, we're going to be going to Jackson, Mississippi. We're partnering with the Governor Bryant there to do a regional event. We're going to do a public event that's going to show people that in the area, make them aware of what's going on. We're also going to be doing a boot camp with state, local officials, and other folks to develop ideas to generate a playbook. There is a hunger for this. We're going to generate a playbook, and then we're going to take this on the road and go to other opportunity zones as a replicable thing. So wholeheartedly support this idea. Consider us an honorary member of your working group as we go forward. So thanks.
These elements are so closely linked because as capital comes into communities that have been underserved, the goal and the result should be local job creation. And we want to facilitate and encourage that. And with that comes, in often cases, training to ensure that workforce has the skills they need. So there's a great natural connection. I'd love to go back to what we were talking about regarding BLS data, because this is something that drives a lot of us crazy when you talk about job vacancies and you can say, well, there are roughly this many job vacancies. We can't tell you where they are in the country. We can tell you what industries they're in, defined in very broad brushstrokes. But this is very exciting to re-envision that and modernize that. And I'd love to hear from our governors about the opportunity to not only make permanent the state-level data push, but also whether it's to pilot at a federal level a way to organize data that can then be utilized by the states or applied to by the states, or have the states take a survey of what's being done on a state level and then make that available to every other state to opt in to help us create the connection. And our governors would know better, and Mayor Lyles, how difficult or easy it is for federal government, state and local officials to be able to access information flow and create that connection. So.
Well, we're not waiting. We're doing it. We've got 108,000 unfilled jobs right now in 5 key sectors, and we know where they are, and that is our goal every day, is to connect the people in those 5 key sectors with the skill sets that they need to fill those jobs. I mean, it's what we wake up every day doing. So I'm thrilled to bring forward what we're doing, what I was doing. You've been doing it for a long time, Kim. The progress that we've made, and then how we can persuade through our delegation or the administration, both. It's going to continue to get more and more urgent. We're continuing to grow in this economy, and I suspect our unemployment rate in Indiana is 3.4, and it will probably go down yet this week again. So I know what the national average is, but we're even more pressed, and Iowa even less than that, or more than that.
Same thing, we're at 2.5. We've got 42,800 unemployed as of today, so we have a daily update on an app that industry can go to, every citizen can go to. Our job openings that we have today is 63,583. Unemployed, again, is 42,800. I can list the 5 top industry sectors. I can go down a little bit farther on the app that we've been able to create with the data that we're getting, and I can tell you the top 10 employers and the number of job openings that they have, and then that connects to our workforce development site where they can post the resume, they can find out what they need. So the more that we can align this, and we need to align with the federal government as well, but sometimes working with BLS to pull the data down, it is not streamlined. We're not talking about the same thing, and there's a lot of frustration, I think, with my director of workforce development. So maybe we can coordinate with what the states are doing and sync that more coherently with the federal government. But I mean, we really, to Eric's point, are trying to, and we know where they're at, we know the jobs, so I think every state, because of the need, is trying to simplify and collect the data to move forward.
And I think the other governors would appreciate doing a survey and seeing what are the best examples and how
are they
each
collecting
governor and each mayor and state and local official learn from one another to improve their level of transparency, which we can aggregate up and feed into our national system. So,
Ivanka, if I could give you everyone just 2 more figures quickly to put it in perspective. March of 2009, don't spend too much time there. It was a different time, obviously, but just in the state of Indiana, in March of 2009, we had 157,000 Hoosiers drawing unemployment insurance benefits. 157,000, March of 2009. In June of this year, we had 14,000.
Incredible.
So, I mean, that's why we're here.
Great success story. Oh, please, ma'am.
Thank you. I wanted to say, I think the idea around the opportunity zones for urban areas is so very important. People are very excited about the opportunity to see the new investment. And Michael and I have already talked about, after he leaves Florida, can he stop by Charlotte so that we can look at what we're doing. We are in a situation where our opportunity zones can often not have development if people are just going to sit and let the 10 years go by with acquisitions. The fear of the people that live in opportunity zones is they won't be able to stay. And that's what we have to really address. And I think that we can. I just think that we haven't gotten to that place that we have that playbook. We've had at least 3 workshops, and we're really grateful that the White House representative was able to attend one. And it is something that we can see a great future. The playbook is what we need. So thank you for the recommendation, and thank you, Michael, for what you've offered to do.
Ivanka, the one thing that became very clear to us in this process, and Al mentioned, he went through and read 3 or 4 states. One of the problems is all various states are doing it and they're using different language, different metrics. So
that's what I just said.
Is that what you just said?
I just said that. That is the problem.
Yeah, we have all of this data, but we can't aggregate it and make any sense of it. So the recommendation is states are doing it. But if Iowa calls something different than what Indiana does, it's not useful, particularly for employers. If you're trying to figure out where you want to locate your business, you just don't know because you've got to spend the time talking to 50 different workforce agencies. So the biggest takeaway from this recommendation is that we get a repository and we get some common language rubric approaches. That's all.
And I just think the speed of
So we need another ontology but no, that makes a lot of sense, and we'll start to implement that. So thank you, Johnny and Al, really thorough and excellent presentation, and we appreciate it. And finally, because we're running a little tight on time, I'll jump to Barbara Humpton and Mike Piovar, who co-chair our working group on measuring and encouraging employer-led training investments.
Great, and picking up on the theme of another ontology, that's going to be one of our recommendations. But it's really, really important and Johnny's been very consistent on this, no matter if it's at the state level or at the employer level, we need to make sure we have standardized definitions on things. And so we're going to be presenting that as one of our definitions. So thank you again, Ivanka and Secretary Ross, for your leadership. And Jim, thank you for introducing us to such impressive young men and women here this morning. It's been great. We've been working very hard since our last public meeting. You can go to the next slide. Just a quick reminder that our working group's been focused on increasing awareness of and providing better information about employer training investments. And within those two focus areas, we've been concentrating on 3 goals. Next slide. Expanding and enhancing the scope and functionality of the Pledge to America's Workers, creating a common framework for classifying training investments, and prioritizing the collection of national data on employer-provided skill-based training. So for each of these goals, I'm pleased to present recommendations from our working group to the board today. Our first recommendation is to expand the scope and functionality of the Pledge to America's Workers website. As Ivanka mentioned, the pledge has been successful beyond expectation. Members of the working group want to build on this success and make the initiative a true worker and employer-focused campaign. It's a pledge to workers by employers. To this end, we found consensus and therefore recommend 4 specific enhancements. And you'll see that some of these dovetail very nicely with the multiple pathways ad campaign. First, adding content on training programs, such as listing types of pledges according to an accepted definition of skill-based training, which will be our second recommendation. Second, showcasing the conversion of pledges to real training opportunities through company video storytelling, which will already be done due to the Multiple Pathways website, which will be great. Hyperlinking as appropriate to pledge company website landing page where skill-based training is discussed. And incorporating a map of the United States that indicates the geographic location where the main types of training are taking place across the country. So you can see with all 4 of these, it's making it more useful both for employers and employees. So now I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Barbara Humpton, who'd give us some specific examples of how Siemens would take advantage of this recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. And first, thank you, Ivanka. Thank you, Secretary Ross. It has been such a privilege to be part of this effort. And Mike, a real honor to be working with you. We've had a really energetic dialogue amongst all of us. And as we've heard this morning, so many of the recommendations that are coming together now really do dovetail. What we can see is that strong alignment of the need, not only from the employee and prospective employee side, but also from the employer side. So as a large job creator, joining with small job creators like Juanita represents, and manufacturers across the U.S., like the National Association of Manufacturers, and we've got the chamber here today, employers everywhere are seeing the value of participating in employer-led training. And what better way to encourage that further under recommendation 1 would be telling those stories, as we've been talking about today. What we've been learning at Siemens is one of the best ways to do this is through the employee voices themselves. Ivanka, at the end of July, we had the opportunity to bring 5 of our employees to the White House to help us celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Pledge to America's Workers. And what we found in our own communication and on our own website is that people are drawn to these stories. They want to know. They're really drawn in by video, by real contact with the people who are experiencing these kinds of changes. And second, the chance to really highlight lifelong learning. That these are opportunities for us as employers to show the kinds of things we're doing to support the overall career development. I think one of the things that we want to ensure we build in as we go forward with the pledge is the concept of own your career. And what we've talked about today with our boarding pass to opportunity, and what we've seen with these young people today, is the opportunity to start early and continue throughout the career. So thank you.
Thanks. And before moving on to our next recommendation, I just want to give a quick preview of where the working group is headed. So if the board adopts our recommendation today on the scope and the functionality of the pledge, that will establish what we want it to be. We'll next turn to the sustainability of the pledge. In other words, where do we want it to live and who will be responsible to it? We've had preliminary discussions where we believe that a private sector organization, either on its own or in partnership with a federal agency, is probably best positioned to ensure that long-term sustainability. But we're going to continue those discussions and hopefully have something formal to present at the next board meeting. For our second recommendation, this is the one creating a standard ontology, standard definition for classifying training investments. It's kind of a two-part recommendation. The first is that the board adopt a specific definition of job-specific skill-based training. And the second part is we recommend that the National Council of the American Worker adopt this definition and promote its adoption by federal agencies and industry. Before I explain the recommendation, I want to give a big shout out to Johnny Taylor and his team at the Society for Human Resource Management for all of their great work that laid the foundation for this recommendation. SHRM conducted a survey on behalf of the board and found that the vast majority of employers, small and large, offer skills trainings program and track employee participation. They also found that more than half of the survey respondents also track the direct financial cost and indirect costs of all kinds of skills and training and development programs. However, the survey also showed that employees lack a cohesive, consistent framework for categorizing the training that they provide. And so this obviously impedes the ability of employers, employees, trade associations, statistical agencies, academic researchers, and other interested groups to accurately and comprehensively analyze the effectiveness of skill-based training. As the National Council develops its national workforce strategy, we suggest that they adopt and promote the following recommended definition of skill-based training. Activities, programs, or events offered by employers that provide employees with the necessary knowledge, technical skills, and professional skills to perform, to stay up to date in their current job roles, as well as to be able to perform future job roles or enter other professions. We thought it was important to include current jobs and the ability to upskill and go into new jobs under other professions. Go to the next slide. We'll give some examples. I don't have time to go through in depth on these, but very quickly, what we wanted to do was make sure the definition included very job-specific skill-based training and excluded things that were just sort of general training that all employees go through. In the interest of time, I'll just sort of skip those. I think they're sort of self-explanatory. I'll go to our third recommendation. Our third recommendation is based on the goal of prioritizing the collection of national data. This goes to our discussion earlier of state data and national data on employer-provided skill-based training. National data would elevate the clear employer role into the education and training ecosystem and inform policymakers regarding training investments. Because training is a strategic decision for firms and for many a competitive advantage, voluntary, self-reported metrics are unlikely to give an accurate picture of economy-wide training efforts. Our working group has been examining different mechanisms to collect such data nationally, including through the federal statistical system, which implemented training-related surveys in the past. And again, much like our first recommendation, we decided to focus, before we try to figure out how to collect this data, we wanted to understand what to collect. And so that's going to be our recommendation today. And on that, I want to give a big shout out again to the SHRM team, who was very instrumental in doing this. And in addition, Professor Marianne Wanamaker, who did a lot of work helping to pare down what we think are the key necessary and sufficient types of information that we need on this. We reached a consensus on a list of data needs, the 5 that are listed above, and we sought to balance both the costs and the benefits of trying to collect this data. On the cost side, we recognize the burden that it would place on companies that would be filling out surveys and that types of thing. On the other hand, we wanted to make sure we had sufficient data to address the data and to actually back into things like if we could try to calculate the effectiveness, efficiency, and even the return on investment for various types of skill-based training. So our formal recommendation is that federal statistical agencies, principally the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and industry trade groups should prioritize the collection of those 5 major categories on employer-provided skill-based training. And so we thought these were sort of the key 5 that were up there. We want to know the incidence, the intensity, the key demographics, the financial metrics that firms are using, and then the productivity gains that are not captured by the metrics, the financial metrics that are there. So sort of the direct financial metrics and some of the other gains. And then we can start looking at making comparisons and looking at return on investment and enhancements from these types of things. So, Barbara, do you want to talk about some why you think these ones fit with what Siemens is doing and why you support the recommendation?
For Siemens, yes, and also I'll just comment, I think this is central to the dialogue that is taking place about the purpose of business today. And Bill, earlier today you commented on the culture that Ivanka, you're creating, the kind of dialogue we need to be driving now in our national interest is one about truly understanding how our actions as job creators and the work we do to empower employees actually contributes to our own financial success, and that this becomes a virtuous cycle that helps drive growth for the economy writ large.
Great, thanks, Barbara. And so similar to our first recommendation, we first wanted to focus on the what, and then next we're going to turn on the how. So if the board adopts this recommendation, we know exactly what we're going to be focusing on in terms of what would be included in surveys or other data collection efforts. And so what we'll be turning to next is how we will collect it and how frequently. So could we incrementally add this to existing surveys? Would that work, given that the things that are up there and given what we're only exploring those options, or is it going to have to be something new? So that'll be something we hope to present at the next board meeting. So with that, Ivanka, I'll turn it over to you and answer any questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Barbara and Mike. And does anyone have any feedback on that, Secretary?
Yeah, since census is part of commerce, we will try to do those 5 items that you have.
I do have a quick question. All of this data would be amazing to see the impact, because I do know that the amount of employer-provided training and the learning that individuals are acquiring could probably far surpass that which is even acquired in an academic institution. The question I was curious as to, has it been contemplated as to how the measured acquired competencies are actually being validated such that they become truly transferable and integrated into the wallet, if you will, so such that, what almost is the employer version of accreditation. Institutions of higher ed have the benefit of, if this has been provided, then the students have acquired these competencies and these things, so they've been validated. How do we get that same thing for the individual so that it becomes transferable, even if it goes beyond the employer who provided it? So I don't know who
Yeah, let me start. And I know that there are companies like Maryland at Lockheed Martin, you're doing extensive work in this area. I actually think this part of the discussion is going to help raise the bar within companies. For a long time, we thought of employees as, a resource of the company, thought of it more as the things we're doing internally, and we're speaking in and amongst ourselves about the skills we need. We weren't necessarily focusing on the power of creating credentials that were recognized. But simple things like participating in registered apprenticeship programs at Siemens, that's been something that's been powerful for us because people do get a portable credential out of that. The micro-credentials that are now being offered through institutions like yours are now being recognized. I think the key now is to knit together the employer roadmap for those credentials with what will become part of the learning record.
Any other closing comments, please?
Thank you very much. I'd like to think of myself as an Irish optimist and a dead-ass realist. And I think, I just want to make two comments. First, whatever we do, and all of these data issues that we address, we have to prototype them before we try and get the whole federal government to do stuff. So, for example, if you took 3 states, 3 large cities, 3 small cities, and the 5 federal data agencies and said, let's just go do this for 2 or 3 states and see what it looks like. Second, I wanted to say in the job training, which is very, very significant, and we don't have all the data, we, and I'm sure the NAM and others, would be very happy to help gather that data. But most of all, I caution, and I support, but I caution going to the federal agencies, trying to get them to put all their data records and issues together. We'll all be doing something else before that gets done, simply because of all the rules, the regulations, the oversight committees. But if we could work with them with the help of the administration, Commerce Department in particular and others, and get them to do a prototype of what it would look like if we put this together with local, state, and federal data and private data, and what the value might be, it'll be much easier to sell. Thank you very much.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you. So with that, I think obviously our working groups, as evidenced by just how much has been produced in the last 3 months, are collaborating very, very closely. And we're going to get much more granular on each of these presentations with which each of your teams over the coming weeks and months between now and our next meeting. So if you haven't made a comment and have one, or you noodle on this and come back with an idea, we're looking forward to getting a full download from each of you following this meeting. But in the interest of time, I'd love to call for a vote on the last 3 working groups. We voted unanimously, including Walmart, Apple, and Home Depot, who have submitted their affirmative votes on all 4 of these categories. But let's start with data transparency and a vote to advance the recommendations of that working group. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Modernizing candidate recruitment and training practices.
Aye.
Great. And measuring and encouraging employer-led training investments.
Aye.
Excellent. Should it always be so easy? We thank everyone here for their time, and as importantly as everyone here, their teams who make it all happen and who take these visions and help execute upon them. And our host, I think Secretary Ross said it best when he said in his opening remarks that it's hard to talk and spend time with youth in America today and not feel optimistic about the future. And we certainly saw that on full display here at the Boys and Girls Club, Clubhouse 14 in Washington, D.C. I'd be remiss if I didn't let everyone know that in front of you, if you haven't noticed already, is a beautiful illustration with a personalized note from a child who attends this clubhouse and their age. Mine says, "Thank you for coming to our club, Aiden Smith, 9 years old." So I encourage everyone to bring this home as a reminder of the real life implications of the work you are each doing. And with that, I'll hand it back to Secretary Ross to close us out.
Well, I thank you all for coming and for participating so actively. If we can keep this enthusiasm going, we'll really get all this stuff to happen, because the next phase is the real nitty-gritty of implementation. And we all know that a great idea, not well implemented, goes nowhere. But even a less good idea than we have, properly implemented, can really make a difference. So the implementation is where it's really going to win or lose, and I feel very comfortable it'll win based on the amount of effort we're putting in already. Thank you very much.
This man knows something about leverage, and we are leveraging you all to the hilt, and we'll continue to do so. So we look forward to executing. Thank you all.
Secretary.
Yeah.